Welcome back to the Jody in Court podcast. We are so excited. We get to shoot the shit with people we genuinely think just kick ass. And today we have the world's best kick-asser, I think. I'm so excited. Sarah Dash-Arbuckle with us. And so I'm just going to read you a quick little bio so you guys have an idea of how amazing this woman is. So today we're talking to, and I should say, Dr. Sarah Dash-Arbuckle. She has 10 years post-secondary education and training. She holds an honors degree in psychology and is a naturopathic doctor who Courtney and I both are familiar with and have worked with. She is also a consulting hypnotherapist, and I can say from experience, her voice is the most mesmerizing thing ever. And certified yoga instructor, also fantastic, and can say from experience. Sarah Dash is the proud mother of 2 children that keep her very busy and encourage her to create balance in her life. I love that. Like, that's so lovely. Her balance is found through cooking wholesome, clean food, singing worship in church, and exercising every day in some way. Since COVID-19 pandemic, Sarah has been exploring her MO. So for those of you that don't know, your MO is your modus operandi. I think that's how you say that, which is just a particular way or method of doing something, especially one that is characteristic or well-established. And when I read that, I was like, oh, my MO is wearing activewear all day, every day.
Because mothering is an extreme sport.
Right? The fact that I'm wearing a gold chain right now is like outside of my MO. Her mission and purpose is to witness others on their path and coach or guide them on their journey from trauma to triumph. And that is kind of going to be the topic of our podcast today. I'm going to warn you, this might be a long podcast. So if it is too long, to honor your listening time, because we want to respect your listening time, we may end up splitting it into 2 episodes and releasing them separately. Or maybe 3. Sarah's like, I'm here for the long haul. Like, I need 3.
I booked a night off and bought a bottle of wine. Like,
I have no kids in the house, so I'm good to go. I love that. I'm going to pass it off to Courtney, who's going to throw some rapid fire questions at our dear friend Sarah.
that was so interesting. As you were reading the bio the whole time, I'm like, yeah, done that with her, done that with her, done that. And I'm like, holy smokes, we have a pretty intimate relationship there, Sarah.
I have that effect on people. What can I say?
Right?
You do.
I do.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a few just rapid fire questions. Give me an answer in like a word. No explanation needed. All favorites. Okay, what's your favorite color?
Green.
Favorite?
Chartreuse.
Ooh.
That's like that vibrant, like that's the moss as it's coming alive.
Oh, I know exactly what color you are talking about. Yes.
And when the trees start to really glow.
Chartreuse? That's what it's called?
I think so.
Sweet.
I could be wrong.
I learned a new thing today.
Yeah, right? Well,
already.
One of many. You just wait. Favorite book?
Jonathan Livingston Seagull and the Messiah. And it's by the same author.
Sweet. Favorite place?
Oh, right here.
Favorite dessert? All is an acceptable answer.
Oh, Henry?
Ooh, nice.
Oh, Henry bar?
Favorite age?
Right now.
And if you were to have a billboard with some words on it that people saw, what words would you put on that billboard?
Love and hope.
Sweet. Awesome.
Those are good. Thanks for allowing us to rapid fire.
That's called free association. It's like a Rorschach test.
It is. I get stressed out when the people are like, "Rapid fire question you." I'm like, "No."
What's the right answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever answer in the moment comes to you.
All
Yeah.
right. Whew.
Awesome. Okay,
You did it. Hard part over.
dive in. I'm so ready to dive in. I'm so excited. I want all our listeners and viewers to know that I don't really know what we're going to talk about today. I kind of know the topic, but I'm so excited to like learn as you are listening to us. So first question for you, my dear friend Sarah, why trauma to triumph? I loved that it was phrased like that, but why trauma to triumph? And what is the significance of trauma in your mission to serve others? So those kind of,
tie in.
why and the what.
So I really believe that our past, present, and future are interwoven and have significance in compounding upon one another. So I love the quote, I would never turn back my odometer, because then I wouldn't remember the roads I've traveled. And wisdom isn't acquired through acquisition of knowledge or facts or details about the world, like your IQ, nor is it enough to just have your EQ or your emotional quotient and how you communicate with others and the way that you've navigated through your emotional life, through your life. But I really think that our adaptability is what is a key component to not just success, but a sense of peace or happiness in your life. And this was born out of my experience in trauma. And I find it very interesting when I try to connect the dots. I love that you guys use that phrase a lot of times in the last episode, because it really, a repetition is key for me. And I hone in on patterns. That's sort of something I have in my vision when I'm listening to people or when I'm seeing their case or their history in front of me. There's these patterns that emerge, and I just love it because I think you have all the right answers within you, and my job is to ask the right questions. So a doctor might know more anatomy than you, more immunology than you, more histology than you, more physiology than you, but they'll never know more about you than you do. They simply can't. They can't, nor can I. But if I am a respectful partner in your team of care providers, then I should be willing to witness you in a non-judgmental way and stand back and ask enough deep questions to try to find the root in all of your symptoms together. So here I grew up in a fine arts high school. It was like Fame. I don't know if you've seen that show. So for me, it was like, not only was I a teenager, but I was going through that feeling, emoting, theatrical catharsis. It was a fine arts school. We had like a theater that sat 750. I took part in one huge production as well as writing my own productions. And then I got my honors BA. So it was like I worked through my EQ and then my IQ when I went to get my BA in psych. Then I had to get my pre-med because your BA doesn't really qualify you for medicine because you need your biology and chemistry and all those things. So then naturopathic medicine is 4 years. And in that study, because I had a psychology degree first, I was really curious, what makes us do the things that we do? What drives us? What motivates us? What holds us back? Why do we drink? Why are we drawn to drugs or sex or shopping? Or why is there addictions everywhere I look? How come there's not a single person that I don't know that hasn't suffered some addiction, including myself? And so I started to turn inward and look. And one of the principles of naturopathic medicine is physician heal thyself. And so it was this repetition again, physician heal thyself. I knew that I couldn't go out and preach in the world unless I had already walked that walk. It's not enough just to talk anymore, right? We're inundated with information from people, including their opinions. Well, I think people desire genuine authenticity and vulnerability. And so what started to happen in my consults with patients is I started to really share a lot of my own story. And this is a real no-no. Like, you're not supposed to cross those boundaries, right? Like, you're not supposed to overshare. That time is theirs. They're paying you to tell you about their life, not for you to tell them about yours. However, it started to emerge that there was this fulcrum. It's like this tipping point, right? So people would come in with these terrible, terrible stories or symptoms or struggles or obstacles, and I started to see the theme. And the theme that kept emerging was this idea that if we look at what we're facing, what we're coming up against, because you're always going to come up against things. Life will never be perfect and peaceful and happy and copacetic. Never. The only constant is change. So you better get used to it, right? So as I was starting to counsel people and trying to make sense for them in what I had learned in my own struggle, I had a nervous breakdown, and I was having a holiday in Newfoundland. And when we returned, my husband and I agreed that I needed help. This problem was bigger than the two of us, bigger than all of my psych training. And I often joke, it's hard to mail an envelope when you're in it. So it's really easy to give advice when you're not involved in something. And then the minute you're actually feeling it yourself, it becomes really hard to see your way back out. So I sought professional advice, and turns out I had PTSD. And when I started to dig into my past, which I had already done and written down, and this is what I suspected I had, but I needed to know for sure, because if you're bipolar, your treatment disorder or your treatment plans and protocols are very distinct than if you have PTSD. So this wasn't about labeling myself and holding myself back in some way. This is more about, okay, I really need to move forward with power and confidence, and I really need to leave the past in the past, and I didn't know how. I didn't have enough tools or resources. So got help, and after 2 years of weekly counseling, I really think that all of my trauma was for good. I really do. And 20 traumas I've identified in 40 years. The other detail to that is something I think some listeners will find very useful. So there's something out there, you can Google it. It's called your ACE score, ACE, and it's Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's a quick little quiz about what you may have run into growing up. This is one measure that some mental health professionals will use to sort of judge or predict who might fall prey to mental health issues later in life. So if you have about a 3, there might be some red flags. They might want to look out for you or reach out to you occasionally. I had a 7. So I was more than double what would be required to have some concerns. So after so many traumas, I noticed that my pattern was this victim perspective. I started to really feel like, why me? You know, this sort of self-pity. I would get stuck in the emotions after being triggered by something, and then, you know, having kids, everything you thought you had dealt with before comes rushing back at you in unpredictable times and places and public, and whew. So motherhood was a real wide awakening for me. I ended up with postpartum anxiety, and you tie to that these emotions that if in childhood you haven't really been shown how to moderate, how to work through, how to release, how to let go, how to sit with, right? And this isn't a blame thing towards parents, because we all do the best with what we have and what we know and the time that we're doing it. And we would often do the same thing if faced again with the same decision, right? So this isn't about beating yourself up. It's really important that you don't hear a blame conversation. The key here is responsibility and perspective. So if I can acknowledge that I'm a survivor, if I can celebrate the fact that I am a strong and powerful woman, then I also have to celebrate the fact that it took something to get me to that place. Listen, you don't build strength unless you fall and get back up, right? Our hardest lessons are often the most concrete and solidified, because there's so much emotion wrapped up into those hardcore lessons. And if we could drop the language of failure and consider things more as feedback, then it might be that little shift to say, no, I didn't fail forevermore. I'm not a loser forevermore. I had a moment where I got to learn a lesson that I will never forget. But see, if you turn back your odometer, you have to give up those lessons too. And so you end up stunting your own wisdom if you just want to rewind and go back to the past. So I really felt like this was a message that a lot of people might benefit from if they knew that all of their struggles were for good, that everything that they face that they wish they could forget about is actually what makes you so special. And that could be your gift to the world in overcoming that and sharing how you did that, or just relating to someone who has no one else to relate to, and then being vulnerable with them gives them that portal or that access of connection. And that's healing. To be heard and witnessed by someone with no judgment, that helps you shift, because it's okay to be right where you are, who you are.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing the power of permission, right? Like giving people permission to just be exactly where they are with everything they felt, and that it's okay to just be where you are. Like, and you can't really give somebody permission or space to do that if you can, but it's way more powerful if you have experienced it.
Well, and if you're not trying to fix them in it, like a lot of times we over console. And I think there's great power in just sitting with someone. You don't have to touch them. You don't have to find the answer. You don't have to have quick advice. You don't have to cry. You don't have nothing. You just have to sit with and be with. And David Comden is my psychologist. And there's been tremendous progress in my life and in my thinking. And I've really managed to move past a lot of those traumas. No, I don't think I'll ever be done. But that's the reality of it. And until I surrender to what is, I can't move past, right? So hence COVID, right? And here my 15-year practice and business that I had blood, sweat, and tears poured into was suddenly gone. And when I closed my doors for 2 weeks, I knew that I probably would never open them again in that location. So the last 9 weeks, and we're moving into the 10th week, I really focused my attention on grieving what that meant, because so much of my life was stuffing down my feelings, either with starving myself or purging or overeating or exercising or sex or shopping or chocolate, or, I mean, the number of addictions in my past is ridiculous. But all of those addictions, once I could look at them clearly, were all methods of trying to cope with the PTSD. And what's so cool about PTSD in my mind, like learning this was mind-blowing. Almost every acronym that we know of in mental health can fit within PTSD. So at times I was diagnosed with GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. Other times I thought I was OCD, obsessive compulsive. What else was within there? Postpartum depression and anxiety. And I thought, geez, I'm just a walking acronym. This is ridiculous. And it wasn't about carrying the label. It was really about a direction. So I knew where to move to with that label. So hope I'm not over talking.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I had like,
they're still finding it engaging.
I had 2 questions kind of like come to heart as I was listening. One is, what is trauma exactly? Because I don't know if, what is trauma? I'll leave it there. The other one is how, so you've talked about that, you talked about that shift from trauma to sort of triumph and stepping into your power. You use the word like sort of just being, right? And allowing yourself to have that history and not letting it define who you are presently or in the future. But could you maybe talk about some of the practical things that got you to the place of being able to do that? Because I have a feeling that some of the listeners who are still more, maybe rewind your life 2 years ago, are in that place. You know what I mean?
Can we start with metaphors and then remind me to come back to practical?
Yeah.
Because I think the metaphors help people buy or understand the concept behind what the things I'm trying to say. So the first is the idea of a chrysalis. If you were tempted to release a butterfly or chrysalis that you noticed was struggling to emerge from its cocoon, and you can tell it's really fighting, and all of its effort is going into what looks like trying to survive or emerge. But if you cut any piece of that cocoon for it, guess what happens? You handicap it forever. You actually render it almost impossible to fly in certain stages of or places where you might cut it. You really shouldn't rescue the chrysalis. And I find that in my own life, every attempt I had to fill the void with something that wasn't just being with it, every time I tried to run away from the feelings or stuff them down or so it came back to meditation over and over and over. And it was like the last tool I was willing to do because I hated it so much. Every time I'd sit down and try to meditate, be flooded with all these thoughts and worries and concerns. And I was like, this is not a clear mind. This is not peace. This is torment. And so through going through yoga teacher training and then hypnosis training, I found a blissful place within myself. I learned to listen instead of just pray. And so I believe that meditation and prayer are on the two sides of that fulcrum, and prayer is talking to creator and meditation is listening. So not that they have to be equal, but I think it's really important to honor both sides of that relationship, right? So the second metaphor that I think is really essential here is the idea of a garden. So if you were to close your eyes and picture this rich soil that you've been tending to and planting seeds and watering and really caring for, and if every time you came out to your garden, you really noticed the weeds and they frustrated you and they hurt your back and your knees and it was so annoying and they just never stop. Those weeds never stop. Well, you're going to lose love for gardening over time because your presentiment of mind is always negative, 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 negative. And the weeds are not leaving. Just like life won't stop throwing you lemons. So, it's never going to be perfect. Better buckle up and do something about it. So if you go out to your garden and you focus on the leaves and the blooms and the fruit and the benefit, the insects, the sounds, the smells, you're going to love your garden. You're going to experience your life or your milieu in a whole new way because you're choosing to focus on the beauty and the gratitude instead of the weeds.
And to take that even one step further, in a lot of the research that I'm doing just in my life right now when it comes to microbiome and soil health and everything,
Yes, ma'am.
regenerative farming is a big interest of mine right now. And in regenerative farming, you need to have cover crops in order to get the maximum yield and maximum health out of your main crop. And so those weeds actually, you shouldn't pick them out. Like they're serving a massive purpose in amplifying the greatness of the things that we want to be great. That's interesting. I really like that metaphor.
And when you look, it would take the microbiome even further into the human body. When you consider that our GI or our gastrointestinal tract is our second brain, that's exactly where mind and body interface. That is psychoimmunology. That is how you have a thought or a feeling, and then you cascade through your body, and then all your cells are shifting in response to those thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. And then that changes your microbiome. It alters what can grow, what can seed, what is left, what is swept out. It is 97% of your serotonin is made in your GI. That is a shut the front door moment. 97% of your serotonin, that is your feel-good hormone, happiness hormone, made right in your gut.
Wow.
I love that you made that connection and that you said that, because I love, like, Courtney and I talk all the time about how thoughts become things, and to like wrap that up, like just within your own body, that your thoughts become things in your body and like changes your body. And it just made me think of, somebody had commented at the gym, maybe in September, mid-September, somebody else that was there had commented on how great I was looking and like, what have you been doing? And I was like, well, I went on a 40-day camping trip and like ate lots of stuff, hung out with my
fresh
family.
Air, sunshine.
It's like, I didn't do anything special. Like I just biked and ran with my kids and hung out outside. And so I was trying to like wrap my brain around what it was that was different about those 40 days that had me, had people saying things to me and complimenting me, where when from September to June, I was working my ass off, running and in the gym and like the nutrition and the everything, right? And so it's like, yeah, but when I was camping with my family for 40 days, the thoughts that I had and the focus that I had were blissful. I was relaxed. I had great sleeps. I slept long. My mental health was in such a fabulous place. And so now, like, when you said that, I just made that connection. I'm like, oh, that's what was happening.
When you're exercising, but pushing it or forcing yourself or over exercising, you're increasing your cortisol, which is your teeter-totter to serotonin. So not only are you influencing the microbiome in your GI, you're influencing your endocrinology and how many hormones and where they're being sent to. You're altering your sleep function. You're altering so many variables that are connected and tied in. And so I really, throughout naturopathic medicine, as cutting edge and fringe walking as we are, I really believe that medicine has been too reductionistic. We've oversimplified the human body and all the systems within it, and we've lost the want to study the art of how those interact. Like, that is mind-blowing how miraculous the human body is. We have a symphony of systems that are perfectly orchestrated and fine-tuned. Like, it really is magical. And if you didn't believe in a creator before, start studying anatomy and physiology, because it's all right there. It is spellbinding and beautiful, and we still don't know all of it. And so I think it is such a bad place to be, to think that we know it all, or that we've already figured it out, or we've labeled everything, or we understand enough. And so even in this COVID pandemic, and I mean no disregard, because I do believe that research is important and frontline workers are important, and I am not essential in a pandemic. I get that, but it doesn't mean I don't have something to contribute or to say. The news, I think it was 1 or 2 nights ago, I'm pointing to my TV as though you can see it. 1 or 2 nights ago, they posted that vitamin D was essential, and everyone that was deficient was showing 12 times higher mortality, higher ICU admittance, bigger struggles. They were not the ones that had asymptomatic carriage of the COVID-19. And so I was like, oh, well, now it's official. The news has said it. Never mind, we've been preaching it for hundreds and years, I just gotta eat some crow and celebrate the fact that we already knew that, and our patients were probably already on those things. Yay. But even more frustrating is that all Canadians are deficient, and we lost the ability to have that test done because we're all deficient. Why bother testing it? Who wants to monitor treatment and see if you're ever in a good value? Well, now it's pretty relevant and important. And, I feel like there was all this open design with engineering, and when we didn't get that when it came to other ideas behind medicine and keeping the immune system strong. Sorry, I'm totally going on a rabbit trail, but I feel like we focused on the organism and the pathogen, and we forgot all about the terrain. So how you sleep, how you eat, the connections you have with people, how full your love cup is, how intimate, how much intimacy you have in your life. All these things influence your health, and your health is your terrain. Your body is the path, and that pathogen has to walk the path in order to make you sick. And there's so many tools that we have, and I wish more people knew how many tools we have to keep ourselves strong and healthy and all that stuff. So here I've had to give up my business. I've had to say goodbye to 15 years of practice and try to reinvent myself online. And so this is the perfect stepping stone, this podcast episode, because I've really had to confront this in my own life. I could cry. I did actually. I'm not going to give up, right? You can't give up. And even though my business looks radically different than it did before, I know that it's good because it is what is. And if I'm going to fight what is, it's going to persist.
I have a story that popped into my head when you just said that. And so Thomas Edison, there was like this historical huge fire that burnt down everything he had built. He had like hundreds of employees, and this huge fire, I don't know what started it or how it happened, but everything got burnt to the ground. And it said that he said to his son, he's standing there watching the fire, ran to find his son and said, go find all your friends and your mother and get back here as fast as you can. And he was like, well, why? And he's like, because you will never see a fire like this again in your life. And it was beautiful because of all the chemicals and everything. It was green and blue and all these colors in this fire. And his son was like, why aren't you like mad and
devastated? Yeah.
And he said, don't worry, we just got rid of a bunch of rubbish. It's all good. And I was like, how many people would actually be able to respond from that grounded a place and that much of
in that way.
like an observer. He wasn't responding emotionally. He was responding as an observer, that like, there's no other way to react, because it's not going to serve him. He could be angry. He could cry. He could be defeated. He could quit. He could give up. He could just like walk a totally different path. But that doesn't serve him, right? None of that would serve him. So just like taking it as like, this is an opportunity to start again. How fantastic. Let's enjoy the colors, right? Like I was just, it's amazing. And I feel like that's what you're doing, is like, it's like, there's no other way to respond but with joy and like excitement about what you get to create right now, which I'm super excited for. I feel like I want to do a Dr. Sarah Dash-Arbuckle masterclass. Like I would pay for that.
That's a great idea.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, write that down.
Yeah.
Because like I want to learn more about how I can build a super performing body with all these other things. I know what exercises to do. I know what food to eat, but the other pieces that you were alluding to, I want to know more about them. Anyways, side note.
Awesome. No, it's good. So the last metaphor is bladesmithing. So in order to create a really sharp sword, you've got to do a lot of different things to the metal. And this is more for the men that might be listening, if there are any. So the metals would have to be melted down. They'd have to be pounded with different hydraulic things versus the hammer itself. And then there's the cold immersion. And then there's the, it's ground down until it's really, really sharp. But in order to be sharp, in order to be hardened, in order to be able to cut and slice effectively, that blade had to go through a lot of suffering to build that much strength. And so I really saw that there were all these metaphors that kept emerging in life or in stories and movies and books. And I was like, I like that. I'd put it in my pocket and it'd carry through. So when you were asking me practically and logistically, I have a lot of art in me, or I have a creative spirit, I guess you could say. And so this can look different for anyone. I'm not saying that this is what your from trauma to triumph will look like. But you should know that there are so many tools to use. You just got to get out there and use them. For me, it was music and singing. Had a lot to do with journaling, counseling, yoga, reading, writing, attending your guys' conference on taking back your story, which I think was a real wonderful pivot for me. And then my brother-in-law ran one in Newfoundland because of how inspiring my story was from having experienced what I did. And it's like all these things have come to percolate to a real fine cup of coffee that's rich and flavorful, and you got to sit with the grounds before that can happen. And so I did all this work, and I'm not done. I am still a process in progress, and I know that my wisdom wasn't free, and I think I can finally be proud of the woman I've created out of what I've experienced. And when I listen to people's stories, I am completely enraptured. I love to listen because there's such hope, beauty, and joy in connecting with somebody on an effective or powerful level. And it might seem subtle in the moment when they're speaking to me and telling me their medical history and life story. But I know that when they leave, something has shifted. And that's not to toot my own horn. I think that anyone can do that with effective listening or reframing and support. But it's not about telling someone the answer. It's not about giving them the tool and then telling them that you healed them. It's about witnessing them healing themselves, I think.
That's interesting. So, my mother-in-law is an energy healer. She does energy healing, and that's exactly what she says her practice is that it's a witnessing practice where she just witnesses the miracle happen, essentially, right? She witnesses the healing happen, and that's her role, just to be a vessel. Is pretty much it.
There's it's like how did you say it? There was the book. What book did you mention right before we started this?
Me?
Yeah.
What book did I mention?
Oh, no, sorry, Jody, it was you.
The obstacle is the way.
The obstacle is the way, right? So I was talking to my sister about this podcast, preparing for it, and it's like, I get really, really excited when I'm working with someone and I can find that sweet spot or the root of all of their symptoms, or it's like, that's when your body decided it wasn't safe to be in it anymore, or that's when your bowel held everything in because you didn't want to let it go anymore, or like there's such symbolism to the diseases and symptoms that we have, and I'm enamored with, I love it, although not every patient wants to hear it. I think that those who do, there's a lot there that you could sit with. And if you're not willing to change your diet, maybe you are willing to change your thinking or your feelings. And, going into counseling, and I'm like, my feelings are unreliable. I am here one day and then here the next, and volatile, and I can't trust them. And he said, that's right. And I'm like, well, that's my botometer. I thought that was my measure of everything in yoga, at least at the time, what I understood. Not that your body means everything, but you have to check in with your body to know if something is sitting well with you or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then my thoughts, and I was like, ooh, my thoughts are not super stable either. And I was suicidal when I was 16 and had a death pact with my boyfriend at the time, and he ended up committing suicide without me. And so there were times where I would hear things like, they'd be better off without you, or you're such a loser, you don't deserve to live, or really, really hurtful, harsh words. And not until I met my husband did I realize that if any man spoke to me that way, I'd leave him, but I couldn't leave myself. And so I had to really look truthfully at my self-talk, because it's subtle. We have sub-personalities. You might have a cranky side and a joyful side and a depressed side and an anxious side, so all those subtle pieces of you can come up at different times, and it can affect how you think and your logic and where you frame and your perspective. And so being self-aware is the first step to activating that change. And it's not fun to confront those ugly sides of yourself or those negative sides of yourself. But that's where the magic happens. That's where the sweet spot is. And that obstacle, if we could just embrace it instead of hating it or pushing it away or being frustrated by it, if we could somehow learn to find it, to hone it.
I really resonate with that. In this, I asked another question of what is trauma, because looking in my life, I think probably I could identify a trauma or two. I don't really know what the definition of trauma is, to be honest. But generally speaking, I don't think I've led a life of trauma. That being said, I feel like everything that you're saying right now can still apply to me. And one of the circumstances, I'll call it, that I've experienced over the last even just half a year was serious skin issues, and primarily, especially on my face.
Yep.
And we talked. I came in all the time to the health hub, and we tried different things, and I've tried. It's come to the point where it's more in control. But I remember in the thick of it, feeling so frustrated and feeling so helpless and feeling like I didn't know the answers. I didn't know what was going to fix it. But now, it's still there. It still exists. I've made some changes that have helped it. And it, just like you, it's still a work in progress, but I'm able to now see it. And I'm still still in the journey of it. So I'm not on the other side yet, but the way that you're saying, seeing it almost as a blessing, because actually, if I even just go rewind 6 months and connect those dots only in the last 6 months, I'm not going back into my childhood necessarily, but even in those last 6 months, that was the trigger that said, oh, maybe I need to look into some dietary changes. Maybe I need to look into, and it boom, 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 dot to dot to dot, which led me to this really fantastic online course that I came across that is really kind of revolutionized, like it feels like a revolution in healing my body, and it's an experience that I would have never been able to
have
create myself, because I don't have the knowledge yet. But I feel like it's actually a doorway into the next phase of who I'm meant to be. But what got me there was the fact that my face was staring at me in the mirror, and I'm like, why the hell is this happening? Like, I hate this, you know? And so, but I needed that. And I still don't like it. I don't like it back, but I guess I can be grateful for it.
Survivors aren't born, they're made, right? We have to endure things in order to get back up. And that's how, and everyone suffers. So I don't know if trauma is the right word I should have used in prefacing some of this, because anything that makes you suffer, right, could apply to this conversation.
Yeah.
And everyone suffers financially, emotionally, physically, mentally, sexually, hormonally. There's so many facets through which we can suffer. And so I really think that this is a conversation that could apply to anyone. And so one of my favorite quotes, if this is a good place to leave off with this question, you can't control wind, but you can certainly adjust your sails. So there's no power in fighting nature or fighting something that you have no control over, almost like the serenity prayer. But identifying what you do have control over will help empower you to motivate the change that you need to make, that'll motivate the next change, that'll motivate the next one. So the thing that you'll leave us with, the outro that I know is coming, is exactly that. It is planting the seed that will then build the momentum for the next ripple that will pass that energy on, right, in your life, and let the world know what you're up to. And so the more you step towards what you're seeking, even if it's in one small way,
I love
that
that.
ripple matters.
It's like there's always obstacles, like you said, right? Like that's inevitable. Like life is never, crystal clear and perfect. There's always, right? Like there's always waves in the water, right?
Damn it! Why not?
Peaceful all the time. Peaceful all the time, me.
And I love like the idea of like when you come up against that, like whether it's trauma, whether it's just it's a setback, whether it's tragedy or whatever it is that you face. It could be external, it could be inner, whatever it is. Like sometimes you have to move sideways, and sometimes you have to go up and over, and sometimes you have to go down and under, and sometimes you have to like do a cartwheel over top of it, it's never right. or sometimes you need to do nothing at all, and you need to just sit, right?
And sit with it. Yes.
You actually just need to do that.
Yeah.
And so I love that idea of just like taking it kind of head on, but with perspective, and kind of like just observing it first, and then kind of navigating your way around it and figuring that out.
If the ocean was all of your feelings and emotions, and if you're on the shore and you're trying to like analyze everything that you're feeling and sensing, if you walk too far out into the water, that undertow is more likely to pull you off balance, right? But if you stay far enough to the shore and still get your feet a little bit wet, which is what EMDR did for me in therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing theory, and it's specific for PTSD. Doesn't work for everyone, and it's certainly not the most pleasant experience, but I have had great gains in experiencing that way. And what it does is it allows you to re-feel the trauma or the moment in a safe place with somebody who's your compass and your map, and let go of all the attachment to what that means about you, and really just sit with it. And there's even references in the Bible to being still. Be still and know that I am God, and that's Psalms 46:10. So right there in the Bible, even, it tells you that you really need to sit with yourself, sit with him or creator, have a conversation, but also listen. Don't just be the one talking all the time and asking for things that you want. It's also about loving yourself, and I don't think we can love our neighbor until we can love ourselves. or love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if your self-talk is that negative, you might want to check how you're judging your neighbor too.
Your house is gonna get egged.
Right? So it's not fun to confront yourself, but I think it's super important and helpful if you want to walk with dignity and compassion in the world, right? I don't want to be a force of dark or hate or anger or resentment or bitterness. Like, I know what that leads to, right? And I plan to skip cancer if I can. Or I've already been there. That's one of my traumas, but hey, conquered that too.
We interrupt this podcast for a special message from our sponsors, Jody and Court. We mentioned at the top that this might be a long one, and we wanted to honor the fact that so much amazing wisdom was coming out of Sarah Dash, so we didn't feel like we wanted to cut down that conversation at all. That being said, we've decided to break this episode into 2 episodes. So part 1 is officially done. Stay tuned for part 2. That will come out next Sunday, 9 o'clock.
And until then, as you move forward with your day, your week, with this moment, consider what Sarah Dash said and just do one thing that plants a seed in your life that will create ripples that take you towards whatever goal you're working towards. And until next week, we'll see you in part 2 for more fantastic conversation with Sarah Dash-Arbuckle.
And it really does only get better.
It does. Oh my
It's amazing. Like, how could it get better? Well, it does.
Yeah. Save the best for last. Okay, until next week, guys, thank you for your patience.